It's funny how we use the word love for so many things. Like, I love a good book. I love my coffee in the morning. But when we talk about love between people, I don't know, it feels like a different word entirely.
It really does. Like, we toss love around for all kinds of stuff, but then there's that deeper love, the kind that really gets to the core of who we are.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today, this idea of love as a fundamental human need, right up there with food and shelter. And to guide our deep dive today, we're turning to Gary Chapman's The 5 Love Languages.
Yeah, a classic for a reason. What I appreciate about Chapman is he doesn't beat around the bush. He comes right out and says it. Feeling genuinely loved is crucial to our well-being. Not just a nice perk, but essential.
Essential. Okay, so what are the implications of that? What happens if we don't feel that?
Well, he points to a ton of research from psychologists, even religious thinkers, and they all seem to agree on this. Humans aren't meant to be lone wolves. We crave connection, belonging. We're wired for it. And feeling loved. That's like the fuel that makes all of that work.
That's kind of a chilling thought, honestly. Like, imagine going through any kind of hardship in life, but without that sense of love and support, the difficulty level just got cranked up.
Totally. And you know what I find so fascinating? It's how Chapman uses this idea of an emotional love tank to illustrate this whole thing, starting all the way back in childhood.
Okay, the love tank. Honestly, I always thought that was kind of a simplistic way to look at it. Like, we're not just cars driving around needing gas, right?
I know, it sounds kind of basic on the surface, but stick with me because it gets pretty deep. So imagine this. Every child is born with this inner reservoir, right? This well of emotional security. You could say it's like a fuel tank, but for their heart. When they feel truly loved, seen, understood, that tank is full and they thrive. But when it's empty...
That's when things get complicated.
Exactly. And to show you what I mean, Chapman tells this story about a 13-year-old girl named Ashley. Now, because of some really difficult family circumstances, Ashley's love tank was completely drained. She was desperate for that feeling of belonging, of being valued, but she didn't know how to get those needs met in healthy ways. So she ended up making some bad choices, looking for attention and validation from all the wrong places.
That's tough. And it's easy to hear that and think, oh, that's sad for Ashley. But haven't we all felt that emptiness at some point? That deep longing to be seen and loved for who we are? I know I have. So does this need for a full love tank, does it ever really go away?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And what Chapman argues is that this need doesn't just disappear when we become adults. It evolves. And it's when we start navigating adult relationships, especially marriages, that things get really interesting.
So we're basically bringing all this baggage, all these unmet needs from childhood into our relationships as adults. No wonder things can get messy.
It's true. And think about it. When most people get married, what are they looking for? That profound connection, that sense of being completely understood and cherished by another person. It's like marriage is supposed to be the ultimate love tank fill-up.
But it doesn't always work out that way, right?
Sadly, no, not always. Chapman actually shares some really powerful stories in the book from real couples grappling with this. Like, there's this one husband who says something like, "What's the point of all the money in the world if your wife doesn't love you?" Really makes you think, right?
Wow. Yeah, that really puts things in perspective. I mean, we tend to define success by our careers, how much money we make. But that deep connection with another person, that feeling of being truly loved for who you are, it really makes you realize what truly matters.
Absolutely. And then, on the other side of that, there's this wife who says, "He barely even looks at me all day, and then suddenly he wants to be intimate. It just makes me feel so invisible, so unimportant."
It's like both of those examples are pointing to something deeper than just physical intimacy, right? It's about that fundamental human need for an emotional connection, for having your love tank filled in a way that actually means something to you.
You hit the nail on the head. And Chapman's point is this isn't just about a few isolated examples. He argues that this underlying need for a full love tank is at the root of so much of the conflict and disconnect we see in marriages.
Okay, I'm with you. So if having an empty love tank causes so many problems, what's the solution? How do we actually make sure our love tanks and the love tanks of the people we care about are full? Is it just a matter of showering each other with compliments and gifts?
Oh, I wish it were that easy. You see, that's where Chapman's 5 love languages come into play. He argues that we don't all need the same type of fuel, so to speak. Each of us has a primary love language, a particular way of giving and receiving love that truly resonates with us on a deeper level.
So it's not enough to just love someone. You need to love them in a way that speaks directly to their emotional needs.
Exactly. And this is where things get really interesting because if you don't know each other's love languages, it's almost like you're trying to have a conversation with two different dictionaries. You might be saying all the right things, but they're not being heard in the way you intended.
It's like what we were talking about earlier. Love being this incredibly important word, but also this incredibly confusing word. We throw it around so casually. But are we really talking about what it means to truly love, be loved in a way that the other person actually understands?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And this is where I think Chapman's work becomes really practical and applicable because once you understand your own love language and the love languages of those around you, it's like you unlock this whole new set of tools for building stronger, more fulfilling relationships.
That makes a lot of sense. But here's what I'm wrestling with. If this whole love tank concept is so universal, why aren't we talking about it more?
Right.
Like, why are we so obsessed with finding the one, falling in love, but we don't talk nearly as much about what it takes to actually maintain that feeling, to keep those love tanks full over the long haul? So that we put so much energy into getting to the finish line, but then we forget all about what it takes to run the rest of the race.
Oh, I like that. And, I think a big part of it is that we tend to think of love as this passive thing that just sort of happens to us. Like you fall in love and boom, that's it, you're done. But what Chapman is suggesting is that real love, it's an active choice, a daily practice. It's about showing up for the people we care about, even when it's hard, even when we're exhausted, even when we'd rather just, zone out on our phones.
So it's not about those grand romantic gestures. It's the small, everyday things we do that really add up.
Yes, exactly. Like noticing when your partner is stressed and just being there to listen, even if you've got a million things on your plate, or really making an effort to see things from their perspective, even when you disagree. It's those little things that make someone feel seen and heard and valued. And that, I think, speaks volumes.
You know what? This is really making me rethink my whole approach to relationships. Like, what if we all treated our emotional connections with the same care and attention as we do our physical health?
Wouldn't that be something? Imagine if we were all as committed to filling each other's emotional love tanks as we are about eating our vegetables and getting to the gym.
Right. We'd probably all be a lot happier and healthier for it, emotionally and in our relationships.
Absolutely. And that's what I find so hopeful about Chapman's work. It's not about pointing fingers or placing blame for our relationship struggles. It's about giving us the tools and the insights we need to build healthier, stronger connections with the people we love.
That's so important. So today, we've explored this concept of love as an essential human need, not just something that's nice to have. We've unpacked this idea of the love tank and how crucial it is to make sure it's full. And we've even touched on the fact that we all experience and express love in different ways. So for our listeners who want to dive deeper into these different love languages, where should they go from here?
Well, I highly recommend checking out Gary Chapman's book. It's called The 5 Love Languages. Very straightforward. And it really digs into those different ways we give and receive love. And it offers some really practical guidance on how to speak your loved one's language in a way that truly resonates with them.
It's not just about loving more, it's about loving better, loving more intentionally. I love that.
Exactly. And I think if there's one big takeaway from our deep dive today, it's this. Love isn't something we stumble upon. It's something we cultivate.
So true. And on that note, we'll leave you with this thought. If you knew someone you cared about had an empty love tank, what's one small act of love you could do today to help fill it? Something to think about, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.